I'm going to be talking about the 4 directions of life. And the key idea for this afternoon, at least that's in the back of my mind that I'm going to be trying to talk about, is this concept of the number 4. And 4 is a pattern. It's more than just a number. Numbers have meaning to them, important meaning to them, other than their mathematical significance. The mathematical significance is important. I'm not trying to diminish that, but there's also ideas and philosophies that evolve out of this concept of numerology. The mind that you have, the mind that I have, is oriented by its nature to a 4-fold pattern. And for that sake, the mind of everybody, the scientists and the good guys, the bad guys, and otherwise. We have this, I call it an instinct, to put things into a 4-fold pattern. You build a house, it has 4 sides to it. Or you make a room in a house and it has 4 sides to it. That's normal. If there's a round room or a room with 5 sides to it, you walk in and it's odd. So this pattern of 4 is an instinctive, natural pattern. We talk about the directions, north, south, east, and west. So there's 4 different directions. And you say, well, yeah, but it's divided into a lot more than 4. You have 8 because you have north, northeast, and south, southwest, and all of that. That's true, but the basic pattern is north, south, east, and west. It's 4-fold. And I guess this afternoon what I'm suggesting is that it's just not an accident that it's happening that way. And I've been talking about this, or building up to this, in my 2 previous lectures, where I talked about a pattern of 2. And in that I was dealing with, or discussing, the 2 fundamental realities. And those 2 realities are, in Sanskrit, called Prakriti and Purusha. And they're realities, or we say they're real, because they don't change. Spirit, Purusha, does not change. Prakriti, which is primordial matter, does not change. And when I talked 2 lectures ago, I had mentioned that these 2 realities are real, they're the truth, because they don't exist in time. Anything that exists in time is transitory and therefore not real. It is these 2 realities that don't exist in time, and because they don't, they are real. And the term that's used is eternal. Immortal means in time, so it's eternal. It exists out of time. I say primordial. To me, primordial means it's before time started. And so you have primordial spirit and primordial matter that we deal with. And it's 2. That idea of 2 is reflected into the universe. And so everything in the universe that I'm aware of, that I think maybe you're aware of, has this 2-fold pattern to it. And within the 2-fold pattern, what happens is there's offspring. In other words, you have a mother and a father. And so that's the basic pattern, divine mother and divine father. And so you have a basic pattern of 2, but mother and father have an offspring. Well, what's the offspring? It's the son and the daughter. And so you have 2 times 2, or a pair of 2s, which is 4. And we're back to this basic concept of 4, or this idea of 4. And interesting enough, the son and the daughter look a lot like the mother and father. There's a lot of relationship that exists there. In fact, when the son and the daughter grow up, they become the mother and the father. So there's a very intimate relationship that exists between the two, let's say, higher factor of 2 and this lower factor, the offspring of the mother and father, which gets you to 4. The thing is, although they're all related, all 4 factors are very intimately related to each other, they're each distinct in their own way. And that's what life is about. That's how life is arranged. As you look through different religious philosophies, through various mysticisms, and throughout the ages, it comes down to us. One of the things that comes into my mind really very prominently is alchemy. And alchemy was very specific about saying there's 4 elementals. Now they say there was a 5th, that's true. But the 5th was always like we got a hand with 4 fingers and a thumb. You have the 4, and then the thumb is there, but it's kind of an odd thing. We call it the God finger. And the 4 are what are really important in understanding this particular universe and trying to muddle our way through this particular universe. And so we're, again, back to that 4-fold pattern. And in alchemy, they talk about strange creatures that wander around, the gnomes and the sylphs and the salamanders, and they say those are dealing with the earth element, the fire element, the water element, and the air element. So there's 4 elementals that exist there, and there's 4 elements that exist in life. Again, it's back to that 4-fold pattern. Now, the everyday man would listen to that and say, okay, well, that's kind of interesting, but what's that got to do with life? What's that got to do with my life? And the fact of the matter is, when the alchemists talk about these salamanders and gnomes and sylphs and that, they're not just saying it's elementals like fire, where you look at a fire, oh, I stick my finger in and I get burned. They're saying it's a living thing. They're saying it's real. It's not, that flame is not just a flame, it's alive. It has a life to it. They're saying the lake isn't just a lake, it's alive. The air isn't the air, it's alive. And I think it's fascinating. I have an electrical background. And in college I studied electricity. And you have to deal with wiring and wires that you connect to things. And one of the expressions that was used was, there's a wire laying there, be careful, that's a live wire. Now, isn't that interesting? They'll deny that the flame isn't alive, but then they say there's a wire there that's alive. It's an interesting faux pas, if I could say it that way. But the idea is the same, and it's important to understand. They call it a live wire because it has a life of its own. If you're not real careful, you could get electrocuted. because you don't know and understand the laws of electronics, of electricity. In the same way, these elementals are alive, according to that alchemical, which I'm talking about. But I'm strongly suggesting that if it's true there, and we move over into just a different philosophy, Hinduism, I would say Kabbalism, or any mystical teaching that you go into, they're really saying the same thing. They're all saying the same thing, that there's four fundamental forces which exist in our life, and those four fundamental forces that exist in our life affect us. They have an impact on us. And just like grabbing the wire, if we're not careful, the live wire, if we're not careful with these forces, these four forces, we're going to get burned, drowned, suffocated, or defeated intellectually. And you say, well, so you're saying that the earth, the ground, I have a handful of dirt and it's alive? I'm not saying that. But if I understand the philosophies that deal with it, they're saying, yeah, it is. In fact, this idea and this concept is really deeply ingrained in our society, whether you know it or not. And if you say, well, what do you mean ingrained in our society? That the air element is alive. Well, did you ever hear of fairies? I think in Florida and California there's a whole multi-billion-dollar industry that started with the concept of fairies. If fairies are such a meaningless dead thing, then what's Disneyland doing there? Talking about the fairies. And children believe they're real, and the parents maybe argue with them or don't. We grow up, when we're children, we believe it, but when we grow up, we lose that belief and that faith. Maybe the children are smart and the people grow up dumb. Maybe they know something we don't know. And what about the ocean? The ocean doesn't have these elemental. Oh, sure it does. You ever hear of mermaids? Mermen, mermaids? These are strong ideas and concepts and forces that are ingrained in our society. The concept of mermaids. A mermaid is a sylph. It's one of the forces that exist in the water element. The fairies are the forces that exist in the air element. We're approaching St. Patrick's Day in honor of our Irish friends. Don't they talk about little green men running around in the forest? The earth elements. These are earth elements. And all of these things that I'm talking about and that I mentioned are portrayed with human characteristics. The fairies are human. The mermaids are human. The little green munchkin men, they're humans. Now, when they say that, it's not that they're humans, humanoid, but they have that form, and it's done that way so you can associate with them, so that you can understand that they have an impact on you. And you know what the impact is? And Don't lose this thought. It's important. It's not that they run up to you and punch you in the nose or drown you when you're swimming or anything like that. That's not the force field that's affecting you. What it is they have a consciousness that exists behind them. That's what we mean by alive. There's a consciousness that exists there, and it affects us. The ocean has a consciousness. You don't think so? Drive to the coast, get out of the car, and your mind has a certain frame of mind. And then walk towards the ocean, and assuming that you don't see the ocean at first, then you move around a corner and you see the ocean, or even when you're driving and you see the ocean for the first time along the road. I've had the experience, and I don't know whether you have or not, but you say, whoa. It impacts me, and they'll say, oh, it's just the scenery, and I'm suggesting it's more than that. There's a consciousness that's there, and it affects you. It affects you, what you can see. I've been talking about visual types of things, but the same is true about the sound. You get near the ocean, and the sound of the ocean, as the waves come in to the beach, or if there's a rock there, they crash against it, and you can get mesmerized by it. It affects you. And what I'm saying or suggesting, it's the consciousness of those elements have an effect on you. You go out and start a fire, and you get mesmerized watching the flames and the fire. You could sit there for hours, some people, just watching the flames. They get mesmerized by it. And we say mystically that it's alive. And so we have these elementals, the 4 elements, and these 4 elements do affect us. They impact us on a deep level. That deep level is the level of consciousness. And I always say that we deal with astrology here at the temple. Astrology is extremely important. And if you ask a scientist, if you ask the scientists about astrology, they'll say, no, astrology doesn't work. It can't. And their rationale for saying that it can't work is because Pluto is so far away, there's nothing on Pluto, or as far as the planet Pluto is concerned, and they decided to degrade it into, I think, a planetoid or something. So it's not, it's a planet, astrologically speaking. But they say it's so far away, the electrical force is non-existent. The atomic force is non-existent as far as you and I are concerned. The force of gravitation is non-existent. Therefore, Pluto has no effect on you. The candle here, this candle holder, they would say, has more effect on you than Pluto does. So we should have, I guess, an astrology for candlesticks, I guess. That's what they're saying. And the mystic says, no, that's not it. The planetoid, Pluto, has a consciousness, and the consciousness of Pluto is very powerful. Not because in and of itself it's powerful, but because my subconscious mind, my unconscious mind, is aware of that consciousness of Pluto. And those two are what are interacting. And those two things are independent of time and space. Consciousness is not limited by time and space. As I've said a number of times, many times in other previous lectures. You go to the end of this universe, and they'll say it takes 8 billion years at the speed of light to get from one end to the other. Or is it 16 billion years now? I don't know. Whatever the size of the universe is. So they take billions and billions of years for, well, physically that's true. And as far as the physics that we're aware of today, that's true. It takes billions of years for light to travel that far. But consciousness is not limited by time and space. And so the consciousness, or the effect of the consciousness, is instantaneous. There is no time factor there. Now that's hard, and I've talked about this before, it's hard for us to deal with that as humans because we can't conceive of what it means to not be in a state of time. We're time creatures, and our mind is a time mechanism. And so to say time doesn't exist, or there is some universe where time doesn't exist, it just doesn't compute. For most of us, our head can't conceive of that or think of that. There's always, well, where was the beginning at? Well, there's a beginning in time. But there was no beginning of Prakriti, of primordial matter. There was no beginning of spirit because there was no time, there's no time relationship that exists there. So it's really meaningless to talk about beginning and end and time when you deal with those things. And those are the things that the universe is really made of, or that's where the universe came from, is from those particular points. Now, I had just mentioned that they want, what's the beginning? Well, if there's a beginning, there's a middle. And if there's a middle and there's a beginning, philosophically, absolutely, there has to be an end. If there's a beginning, there must be an end. And of course, if there's a beginning and an end, that by sheer implication, if nothing else, means there's a middle there. And that's why we get the three. And I tried to talk with that last time we talked. I tried to say, well, here's this, that idea of three comes into the picture. The idea of three coming into the picture is the idea of Prakriti. And Prakriti has three gunas. And the three gunas really are the beginning, the middle, and the end. And you can, any threefold categorization can be done with that. So you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and there's the threefold factor. And that's what happens with the elemental forces that I've been talking about. If you want to understand these forces, by the way, let me just say this. The best way to understand what are the fundamental forces in life, the elemental forces, who and what are they are, how do they affect us, how are we manipulated by those forces, you just pick up an astrology book. In astrology, every sign has one element associated with it. So the fire sign, there's 12 signs, and there's 4 elements. So that means, for example, Leo, Sagittarius, and Aries. Those are all air. Excuse me, those are all fire signs. So they're affected by the fire element. And then you say, okay, well, what makes them different? Well, what makes them different is the beginning, the middle, and an end. So for each sign has a beginning of it, a middle of it, and an end of it. Or if I could say it slightly different, Each quadrant has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And forgive me for a moment, I'm kind of stumbling over the words, but what I'm suggesting is each of the elementals is modified by the Trinity, the threefold factors of beginning, middle, and end. And so you take the 3 and you multiply it by 4 and you get 12. And that's how you get 12 zodiacal signs. It's a mix of an elemental in the beginning, the elemental in the middle, and the elemental and an end. And you get 12 different patterns there. And again, if you want a description of what each of these patterns is, you just pick up an astrology book, and an astrology book very clearly delineates what all the factors are. And as you read that, understand what they're saying is that the configuration of the universe that's out there, is affecting us. It affects us based on our horoscope that we have. And if you want to understand what that effect is, the astrology books tell you what the effect is. And so you say, well, then that means we're predetermination. Our life is predetermined. And the answer is really yes and no. Yes, it's predetermined because those elemental forces are very powerful forces, and they're affecting us, and we're acting like a puppet and doing what the elementals say we should be doing, and what the Trinity is saying that we're supposed to be doing. Each of the zodiacal signs, it's telling us what we're supposed to be doing. And we're doing it. Our subconscious mind says, yes, you're going to do that. Saturn's in your sun sign, that means you're going to be depressed. And we say, yes, sir, and we get depressed. But it's by choice. We choose to get depressed. It's not that we're forced to do it. So it's not predestination. Whatever your chart is, the chart can be overridden. Now, it's not easy. Much easier said than done, because the forces are very powerful. But there's one force that exists that's far, far, far more powerful than your chart. It's far more powerful than any force that exists in the universe. And that's the force of your consciousness. So, what I'm saying is, if you're having a bad time, you're having a bad time because you want to have a bad time. If you're having a good time, it's because you want to be having a good time. Like I said, that's what our thought is. That's what we're thinking. What I'm saying or suggesting is it's not true. Inside of us, our consciousness is saying, okay, the force field outside of us says to me I'm supposed to be depressed, or it says I'm supposed to be happy, and I'm saying okay. And then I get real depressed, or I get real happy. Wow, I won the lottery. That's why I'm happy. That's not why you're happy. There's people that win the lottery and commit suicide. How can that be? There's people that lose an arm and a leg and they're happy. They're inspirational speakers talking about how great life is. You say, how can that be? That doesn't make sense. Well, it doesn't make sense logically, maybe, or philosophically, logically. But if you understand consciousness and the way consciousness works, it makes perfect sense. The person just says, I'm not going to be limited by those outside forces. I'm not going to let them ruin my day. I'm not going to get them to make me win the lottery. I don't want to win the lottery. Because I don't want to be forced to do anything I don't want to be doing. I want to control my own life. I want to be controlling my own destiny. And you know what? If I win the lottery, I'm going to be sucked into this earth world and all the mechanisms and manipulations of people trying to get the money from me. And I don't want to have anything to do with that. So I'm not interested in the lottery. I'm just interested in life and getting through this life and being happy with what I got. And from that point, from that position, wherever I'm at that point, I want to advance spiritually, because that's really where the gold is at. That's really the best lottery to win, is balanced self-conscious awareness. So I wonder if any God is having a lottery ticket for that. If there is, let me know, because I want to get in on it. I'll pay for that one. Now, I had mentioned that in the beginning, this primordial matter, primordial spirit, primordial matter has no consciousness to it. It's a thing. Spirit has consciousness, but it doesn't have anything else. And according to Sankhya Yoga philosophy, consciousness wanted to do something with primordial matter. As I understand, I don't think it was an accident, or as I understand the philosophy, it wasn't an accident. It was with intent. And so consciousness interacted with primordial matter. Now that's on a philosophical point. We anthropomorphize it by making it into things that we're accustomed to. And so what we do is we say, oh, the spirit is like the male principle, and the matter is like the female principle. And so you have, the man and the woman, they get together, or the male and the female, they get together. Prakriti and Purusha get together. They got married, and they had a baby, and the baby was called our universe. And out of our universe, or out of this joining together or working together of these two principles, the universe evolved, was projected out, however you want to say it. And just like the universe out there was projected out, the same is true of the universe within us. And so within us, we have this divine mother and divine father principles within us. We're a part of this universe, not a part of us. We're a part of the universe. Everything is one. That's where the one comes in. Everything is really one. Now, though that's true, it's true of the external universe, it's also true of us. And so what I'm saying or suggesting is that within us, there's a divine mother and a divine father. It's called the Ajna Chandra Chakra in Sankhya Yoga philosophy. And it's at the top of the spinal column. And we say here, between the eyes at the root of nose, at the nose is the sun, and just opposite that at the medulla oblongata is the moon. And those two at one time were one chakra, is what they say. And this is actually, in Western tradition, it's the story of Adam and Eve. Adam went into a trance, a meditative state, and separated the male side from the female side. Now, within the two entities, or within the two, exist really complete entities. In other words, though the masculine and the feminine were separated, the masculine contains the feminine, and the feminine contains the masculine. However, there's inclinations in each one that are stronger, if I could really maybe saying it in a hopefully not too bastardized a way of saying it, because it's really a high event, a very mystical event. But when that happened, of course, they had offspring. There were generations that eventually, I'm making a short story, very short and sweet and fast and all that, running out of time, had offspring. These offspring were called Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn. And that's the diagram that I gave to you, is what that's all about. I put that on there because I started talking about the fourfold pattern of life. And I said there's four distinct elementals. But then I said, well, wait a minute. Now there's this beginning, middle, and end. And so the qualities are changing, and there's 3 of those, and now all of a sudden I'm at 12. They would say, well, yeah, that's 12, but 6 of them are male and 6 of them are female. And from that we get the 6 planetary systems. And again, I apologize, I'm going through this really fast because it's kind of separate from the concept that or the idea that I'm trying to talk about today. But what happens is those pieces of the universe, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, those pieces of the universe exist within us, or at least the consciousness of those pieces of universe exists within all of us. Again, we're part of the universe. And that's what's represented here, and I'm trying to show here. And the key point I was going to get at was, at the top what we have is 2. 2, which is the male-female. That's separated out. There was a projection out in the universe, and a lot of stuff happened. Creation of the solar system, projection of the solar system. And it ended up at what we call Saturn, at the base of the spine. And at the base of the spine, there's 4 aspects to the Saturn chakra. What we say in yoga is it has 4 petals. That means it has 4 characteristics. Well, I'm back to the beginning, and I have to conclude at this point. But what I'm saying is there is an intimate relationship between the Sun-Moon Center, the Ajna Chandra chakra, and the Saturn chakra, which is 4 petals on it, or 4 force fields. And those 4 force fields are related to the 4 fundamental forces that exist that I had talked about before. And again, the last few minutes, I know I've just thrown a whole bunch of stuff out there, and I apologize for that. But let me close off at that point and just see if there's any questions. And I'll have to pick it up at a future date to go into that a little bit further.
The threefold pattern, does this connect with Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva?
Yes, it's the same thing. Wherever you see this intimate threefold pattern, they're talking about an extension of, usually I should say, they're talking about an extension of the Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu idea. And they'll talk about light, darkness, and heat is another way that it's talked about. Thank you for your participation this afternoon. Shanti.
Nanda la la